You may know the name Elazar Sontag. He is the new Washington Post food critic, but this time around, you will also know his face. For the first time, the Post food critic will not be anonymous. When Sontag started reviewing restaurants 3 months ago, he knew he had a big job in front of him. Since then, he's discovered just how vastly diverse, layered, and complex and thrilling this region's dining scene really is, and it shows in his work. Elazar Sontag, here you are sitting with me, no disguise.
Here I am.
Not even a hat.
Not even a hat. Me and my bald head.
Tell me about the decision to no longer be anonymous as the Washington Post food critic.
For me personally, I am just not an anonymous figure.
Right.
A lot of the critics of the past generations, they didn't have digital identities. They could come into these roles and do a really thoughtful, excellent job of remaining anonymous because people really didn't know what they looked like. I don't know what kind of internet scraping I would have had to do to sort of become anonymous, but it would have been complicated, I think, at best. And so that's sort of my personal backstory, that anonymity was always going to be very challenging for me. But I think that also the role of a critic has changed, and the feasibility of anonymity for everyone. The few critics in the country who have remained anonymous, most restaurants know what they look like because the digital reservation platforms store so much information about you.
Yes.
Even if you have fake phone numbers, fake names, things that I do have, it only really gives you probably a few months, maybe, before that information has been disseminated and you have to change it up again. So there's been a cultural change. The last thing I would say is that I want to talk directly to everyone, to readers, to fellow critics, to chefs when I'm interviewing them and I'm trying to understand, the significance of a restaurant. And so I'm still trying to dine, not anonymously, but, sort of under the radar, using these aliases, still using some of those tools. But then I want to be able to share these reviews on social media, if I run into people out in public, to be able to do something like this and give you a sense of what's going on behind the scenes. And so I do think it's not just changing times. I think there's real upside to a role like this being more public-facing.
Can you talk about that? You're not just a food critic to give reviews and stars. You're a storyteller.
Yeah, and I think that this has always been the case, and not being anonymous makes it a little easier, right? To be able to say, I'm reviewing restaurants, I'm helping you decide where to eat, but I also want to help you understand how restaurant culture period is changing, right? How the world around us is shifting. And it's not to say that you can't do that anonymously. My predecessor did an excellent job. The anonymous critics over the years have done a beautiful job of this, but it does become easier to connect with people, to access some of that storytelling when, you're a face that people recognize. And that is, to me, the most important part of the job, the storytelling, right? Of course, telling people where to eat, but also giving them a sense of why it matters. I want people to go to a restaurant with a sense of excitement because they know the food is going to be great, but also because there's some there. There's some protein. So that's what I'm hoping to do in this role.